Hello,
Hi.
everyone, and welcome back to the
Hi.
Symphony. Symphony Entertainment, Gaming, and Arts is my gaming company that focuses on horror systems, indie games, organic content, and player agency in an attempt to bring a symphonic approach to horror role playing. I am your host, Bridget Jeffries. Jeffries. Don't worry, I've got coffee. We'll figure it out, guys. I am your host, Bridget Jeffries, and tonight, this afternoon actually, I am joined again by two incredible forces of energy in our community, Ravey and Evan Perlman. You may recognize them from our previous video, 4 creative ways for GMs to introduce characters. If you have not had an opportunity to watch that video, it is currently up on the Symphony YouTube. I would highly recommend it. They were absolutely dripping with value. I cannot recommend this video enough. I learned quite a bit, and I've actually watched it twice and took notes on the second time. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, definitely check out the 4 creative ways for GMs to introduce characters. Today, we're back with a roundtable discussion, maybe argument, possibly unpack, or a 30-minute deep dive into character immersion, first versus third person. This was actually brought up, touched on, teased out just a bit by Allie in our previous video. And then she cycled back. It's like, yo, we should do a conversation about that. And I was like, damn, you're right. And Evan was like, yeah, count me in. And here we are. So let us get started, shall we? Before we get into the fun, Allie, start us off, babe, please. Tell us who you are, what you do, and where people can find you.
Yeah, I'm Ravey. You can find me primarily on the Old Ways podcast, including their Discord server. I play Katerina Bogdanovich on the Vampire the Masquerade Chronicles that we are running, and as well as many other side quest type things. I'm all over there.
You are.
Come come find our Patreon, come join us, and we're a good force of nature over there. And I'm also on the Symphony Discord server, so I'm findable. Just find me, I guess.
That was sexy. I love it so much. And Evan, babe, same thing. Tell us who
Yeah,
you are or what you do and where people can find you.
I am Evan Perlman. I am a writer primarily for Call of Cthulhu and a couple other systems here and there. I'm just starting out in running games on recordings and streams. I think I will have streamed by the time this comes out with Bridget on Symphony, my new supplement, Debutantes and Dagon, which is badass Regency ladies fighting Cthulhu and the mythos. I am also a group project leader for Cthulhu and other games. So we have an upcoming thing called In Strange Seas, which is the British Royal Navy versus the mythos. We have a couple of pieces out called Hometown Horrors, which is people taking a page to talk about why their hometown is creepy and full of monsters. And you can find me on the Symphony Discord. You can find me on the Miskatonic Repository Creator Circle on Facebook, and those are the best places to find me.
When I told you guys crazy value, if you can't tell already, like amazing forces of energy and leadership in this community. Thank you guys both for coming again. So, what exactly are we talking about? I want to identify that very quickly with a very academic answer. So we're looking at character immersion, first versus third person. So if you're not aware, a first person narrative is a mode of storytelling in which the storyteller recounts the events from their own point of view using first person such as I, us, or our, or ourselves. So first person is you're in the driver's seat, you're telling the story from your particular point of view. In a third person narration, it's a mode of storytelling where the narrator exists outside of the events of the story and is basically relating to the actions of the characters by referring to their names or by third person pronouns that he, she, or they. Because I'm extra, and honestly, these two are so incredibly talented, I will fish for any opportunity I can to role play with them. I'm going to tee up a super brief scene using Allie in the first person and Evan in the third person, just so you guys can get an idea of what's going on. The only issue is previous Bridget, who prepared this copy, didn't actually come up with a scene. So, Evan, just set us up with a location and an era, just something.
I guess we'll be outside of a diner in the 20s.
Okay, so
Do they
outside of
have
a diner
diners?
in the 20s. All right.
I assume they had diners. Whatever they are. Not laundromats. What are those called?
You
We get
want
the
to do laundromat?
sandwiches. Automat. Automat.
Automat. There we go. Look at you. We got it. Okay. Allie, just give me a quick rundown on who the characters are. Are you guys employees? Are you visitors? Just give me something.
Uh, Charlotte and William are coworkers at a detective agency that is going under.
Nice.
Ooh, okay.
Nice.
Charlotte and William are in a detective agency that is currently on its way under. This is the 1920s, and you guys are at an automat. Yeah?
Yeah.
You guys are at an automat, and
And we're
Evan, team up.
investigating possible. We've been hired by an insurance company to investigate a possible insurance claim fraud because people have been getting sick at the automat,
Okay.
and they're trying to figure out if that's like a scam.
Okay. Snow is absolutely falling from the sky. It was a heavy, heavy, heavy downpour when you guys were arriving. You can only imagine the 2 hours that you guys have been inside the automat that has been worse, but you haven't been able to get outside because there is something killed a lot of people in this place, guys. You were just on scene. You were looking through, wading through dozens of bodies when whatever this is has trapped you inside of a back storage container, maybe a kitchen. I don't know. We're making this up on the fly. That has blocked you from going back out through the main lobby restaurant area or out. So you are trapped between whatever this absolute creature is right now. And Charlotte, there has been a steady woof, woof, woof at the door as whatever this thing is massive and huge, and it's been pounding, and you're watching the last bits of the hinges of this door fall apart, and one way or the other you're getting ready to confront this. And then I'm just going to throw it to you guys for 3 minutes, and I'll chime in if you need me.
So I'm gonna grab a bar stool, because this is the kind of place that would have a bar stool. I can only imagine, since I don't really know what an automat is.
It's
So I'm gonna.
it's like a diner, but it's the little things where you put a coin in the slot and there's like pre-prepared sandwiches and stuff. So it's like,
Oh!
yeah.
You learn something new every day. See, that's role playing right there. Neither of us knew what the location was, and we're like, yeah.
It'll be
Yeah.
fine. So
Yeah.
yes, it would have bar stool. So I'm just gonna like grab a bar stool and have it at the ready, right? And I'm just gonna be staring at the door, doing the equivalent of like readying an action.
Okay.
Because the hinges are gonna come off sooner rather than later, right? So
Yeah.
if I can, and generally when a door comes off the hinges, it's gonna go down rather than to like one side. So I'm just gonna kind of hang out in a place where I can swing the bar stool at whatever this thing happens to be.
Okay, Charlotte, on your 6, you're preparing for this door to come crashing down, whatever this thing is to come in. And you can hear on the other door beside you, behind you at this point, sniffing. And something is panting, and something is just furiously clawing at the bottom of this particular door. It doesn't look like it's making a lot of headway, but whatever it is on the opposite side of you really wants in too. William.
Yeah. So William is kind of crouching down near Charlotte. He's got a really dismally small little pistol, really, meant for deterring robbery, not mythos monsters. And he's just kind of babbling a stream of ideas. He's like, all right, Charlotte, when that thing comes through, I'll shoot, you run. Okay, maybe I'll go over here. And he does not really forming a coherent plan. He's just kind of running along and almost hiding behind her.
Okay. The door comes down. Cold air comes in with just a waft of what you would consider maybe relief, because it's like taking out some of the smell of the corpses that you guys walked in, but it's also carrying something else that is very sweet and oily, and you can't see anything in front of the door. You can just see the wind skirting past some type of invisible force that is standing there. That door comes colliding down. What do you guys do?
Once the door has fully settled like onto the floor, I know that that's probably the only shot I'm going to get, so I'm going to just swing. I'm going to swing that bar stool in real good. I'm probably not going to have a lot of control because it's a bar stool. It's not like they're significantly good melee weapons. So if I impact something, that's great. And if I don't impact something, well, I'm going to have a little bit more of a panic attack at that point.
Okay. Now, I just have a quick question for you, Charlotte. You're holding on to the bar stool as you're swinging. You're not just launching the bar stool at this
Yeah,
thing.
no, I'm hanging on to the legs. I basically picked it up so that I could kind of hold it like a baseball bat. But then when I get ready to swing, I actually specifically move my hand down to like another of the bottom like feet so that I can swing it a little more freeform.
Okay. You move, you go to swing, and William, is there anything you want to do before I describe impact?
So William is taking a bunch of steps back, and he wasn't really intending to shoot because he saw that Charlotte was going forward, but he slips in a puddle of either someone's blood or his own vomit from before or something, and kind of involuntarily pulls the trigger as he's going back in the general direction of the door.
Bang. There's a moment of silence, and then we're immediately going to get into the content. Allie was in first person. Evan was in third. This is just what I assigned them for the moment, but I do have a question. Allie and Evan, what is actually your preferred method of storytelling when you're usually sitting down at the table? Do you usually go to first or do you usually go to third? Or do you mix it? Because apparently there's a combo. Let's go ahead and start with Allie.
I'm a first person individual. At first person for at least me and for the other people I've met who primarily play in third and for wow, words are hard today, guys.
Aren't they? The struggle.
Daylight savings, baby.
People who generally, right, play in first person, they are, and I mentioned this in the last episode, right? It's about being all in. And it's the player being all in rather than a character being all in, because those are two very separate things. Because the way that you interpret the character may not necessarily always be how the character is going to act. So you have to be able to reconcile the way that I want to play this versus the way that the player wants to do this versus the way that a character would actually act are not always going to be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So as in this very brief scene, Charlotte, I might not actually, as a player, want to swing this bar stool at whatever is coming out through the door because that sounds like an awful bad plan. But she's a little headstrong and she's a force to be reckoned with because William might be kind of relying on her more mental stability strength to kind of get them out of whatever scrapes that they get into. So she has to be able to confront whatever potential dangers there are. At me as a player, I don't want any of that, right? But her as a character needs to be able to do that. So me as a player needs to buy into that's the way that she behaves. And that's why I prefer first person because it gets me right into the mindset of whoever this character is. And it gives that feeling of, oh, everything that is happening is going to be as emotionally impactful on me as a player as it will be on the rest of the table. And for me as a player, that's really important.
Love it. Evan?
Yeah. So I habitually play third person for a couple of reasons. One, because I'm usually a GM, and so I'm used to hopping from head to head and describing people's, outside of myself. But two is I think kind of getting to a similar way for what Ali was saying, but getting there a different way. So I need to be able to make suboptimal decisions in a horror game. And it's real hard when I'm using the I pronoun to be like, I'm a coward who's hiding behind Charlotte and shooting too soon. Like, it's easier for me to suppress my desire to do good things and to do them smartly if I'm describing it as something that someone else is doing. And that was kind of a surprise to me, but I like in a horror game, I like being, able to throw a wrench into things for myself. I'm not trying to screw up other players, but to make mistakes on purpose, to inhabit a character who's not always super thoughtful, but it's easier for me to do that if I describe it as, look at that dope over there, and so I need that dramatic distance to be able to play a character who doesn't think like I do.
Oh, I like that. You guys are almost paralleling on the tracks, but you're still approaching it differently. I tend to stay in third person, but I think that's just because my brain is so heavily programmed with me being GMing all the time that it's for me to go to first person for just an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours is so jarring for me. I'm either too lazy or my brain doesn't like switching tabs enough for me to actually go to first person full time. I can do it during dialogue, no problem. But as far as how the character may feel, when you do the deep dive, like, oh, my character is sitting back and thinking this, it's just easier for me to stay in third person. So next question I have for you guys. What are the potential benefits or pitfalls of either method? You guys both kind of touched on it, but that's the question, so I'm asking it.
I mean, for me, the pitfalls of third person are that for me and from other players is that sometimes you overthink a little bit too much.
I can see that.
I
can see that.
You get you get caught up in some of the more like technical things. If you're playing a game, you're talking D&D, anything that has like a traditional, you need to roll for a skill, you're going, oh, well, maybe, you know, he's going to do this, or he's going to do this, or he's going to do this. And you have the options to pick from, which is great, but sometimes it leads to a hiccup in trying to plan something for yourself when you're trying to essentially plan around other people, right? Which for some players is
Interesting.
a which for some players can be a pitfall. For me, it's a pitfall because if I overthink too hard, then I can't more actively enjoy the role playing. So, first person, you have a lot more reactive role playing, right? You're the character, so you have to react to what the situation is in the moment rather than saying, "Oh, well, I can do this particular thing because it still fits within the character, but I can reapproach it a little bit differently." And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just not the way that I, as a player, can handle it.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think, I think you've identified, what could be a drawback in a lot of circumstances, in that I don't tend to connect emotionally with my characters.
Hmm.
Um, which is probably good for me, because again, I want the freedom to put them through some crap, right? I
Yeah.
want to make them miserable. I want to make them suffer for bad decisions. And it's easier if I can sort of take the author's stance on it and be like, oh, I'm just making good drama here. Um, and it's also, I think, a little easier for me from a third person view to synchronize with the rest of the table, because I can think of my investigator character as one of many characters who we're all trying to get a good story involving. And again, just for me, again, maybe because like I don't have, I don't really have any acting training. I don't really have any improv training. Like I've just kind of organically come up in role playing. And so I never really had any outside experience at separating myself from a character, and in gelling with a group. And so
Ooh,
maybe
good
that's just the tool that I
perspective.
use.
Really good perspective. This isn't on the table, but I'm just curious. Do you think most players adapt to like new players coming into the game? Actually, let me just stay on track before I get myself all over the place. What method do you think is easier to transition new players into the hobby? And now I'm going to do my subset to
Sure.
that one is, do you
Yeah.
think players adapt to the storytelling style that is around them? Like, for example, if all I've ever heard is people role playing in third person, would my brain just make a leap to say, hey, I'm going to go to first person? Would it stay in third person because that's what I've been trained with? I don't know. Evans thought that he hasn't had any recreational professional like acting training. Just made me think about that because he isn't used to separating himself from a character, at least from a performance standpoint. I'm rambling. Just go ahead, Allie.
So to kind of come off of that, I haven't had any formal acting experience. I outside of like elementary school, I was never on stage for anything outside of like when I was in choir, and that's a totally different kind of, it has nothing to do with role playing. So the
Mm-hmm.
like performance factor basically has nothing to do with it. So watching people have come in as fresh role players, I think it's all a matter of what they're comfortable with. Like I have seen players that come in hot and heavy in first person, and that's because it's just what felt natural to them. So I think I think the key to new players coming in is whatever feels more natural to them. If they build a character that feels very personal, they put a lot of themselves into that character, they're probably going to be more inclined to use the first person I, we, our pronouns versus
Mm-hmm.
someone who isn't really sure what's going on, or they're kind of not attached to whatever is happening. They're probably
Mm-hmm.
more inclined to use a third person he, she, they versus a first person pronoun thing. And there's nothing wrong with either of those methods
Hmm.
because I've played at many tables where I'm the only person using first person narrative because that's just where my comfort zone is.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't noticed a systematic, and I was thinking about like, are there games that encourage one or over the other, and I don't think I've seen that yet. I think people, like Ali, like you were saying, I think people just find their level, um, regardless of the table, and that's kind of where they are and what they're doing. Um, it would be interesting if a game like advised players, try out this and see how you like it, try out that. I could see something like 10 Candles or Dread, right? Like really putting a note in there, like you'll get a deeper or gnarlier experience if you use first person here. Um, I don't know that any of them do, and I don't know how well that would go over. But I'm just in my designer brain. I'm thinking about it. Like, is that something I could talk about? I don't know.
Your designer brain is triggering my designer brain because I really want to pull out the Call of Cthulhu rulebook behind me, because you know how they have examples of like role
Yeah,
play
yeah, yeah.
situations, and just curious to be like, when they're doing it,
Oh,
are they in
yeah.
first or? Damn it,
That's a good. Yeah,
that'd be
Um,
something worth looking into.
yeah.
so as someone who has read many different like core books or like player manuals, almost always they're in third person so that it connects more to the reader.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
It's actually a more common thing is that at that point it's like, oh well, Charles Manson had this. Wow, I came up with a really
Yeah, look
terrible
at that name.
name.
Here we go. We are where we
He
are.
yeah, he did these particular things, he acted in this particular way, and this was you're describing a skill. This was a consequence of not having fulfilled the requirements of that skill. It's almost all I haven't seen one that's specifically in first person, because maybe when someone's just reading through a rule set that they're not going to understand an I in that particular situation. If you're going to
Right.
understand
Yeah.
how that skill is going to work, it's better from a third person narrative perspective.
Just in the background, guys, I'm pulling up the Keeper rule book just on some. I'm really curious. But while I'm power scrolling through that rule book just to look through one of the in person
It's
examples they
Harvey Walters
give or
somewhere, I
whatever,
think. Yeah.
I will say this much, Evan, from a performative standpoint, and when I'm using that phrase, I'm basically meaning anytime you're role playing for an audience. So whether you're doing a podcast, a stream, a live show, or whatever, I have been on sets before where they specifically told me, hey, make sure you stay in first person the entire time. We need you in first person. Now, is that just personal preference? I've never actually asked, like, but why though? I'm sitting on somebody else's set, so I try to comply the best I can to what their expectations are. But I have been told before, hey, you need to be in first person. But only with performative role play. I've never done it at like a convention table where somebody's like, hey guys, we need everyone to be in first person.
So I actually, as a GM, on a couple of occasions have specifically compiled a table where I wanted everyone in first person all the time, because the game that I was running was always a homebrew, and it was very specifically I want all of my players emotionally invested in this game. And because the way that my brain interprets first person, you are invested in that character because essentially you are that character during that time frame. And as such, I want you to be emotionally impacted in things. And I feel that the emotional impact of whatever those situations are, good or bad, isn't going to be as noticed if people are distanced from it. And the way that my brain interprets it is like a craps table in Vegas, right? Because craps is a group experience. Everybody's in on it together. So when the person rolling the dice rolls really well, everyone celebrates. It's a whole big thing. And when someone rolls really bad and the table's cleared of all the chips, everyone empathizes with, man, we all just lost all of this money. And there's this camaraderie, and that is both a good and a bad thing. Everyone is there invested in that situation and in that story. And I know that that's not for everybody. So during sessions like that, where maybe it's a particularly hard session, maybe a character has died, you have to be able to know your players going into that. So it can't be a hard requirement all the time, especially for something like a convention where the chance is very, very high where you haven't played with any of these individuals before.
So, have you found when you've done that your players are a little more risk averse, or that they sort of hold back a little bit on things that would trigger big emotions, I guess, or that, you know what I mean? Like because for someone who is into that experience, I think the requirement would help them get there. For someone who's a little nervous, I wonder if they would shut down a little bit and be like, because I'm identifying more here, I'm going to take the safest role playing choices I can. I'm going to avoid conflict with other players. Like because that's how I operate, because my brain is broken and I'm a coward. But I don't know if that occurs in other people.
It does. And the thing that I have found in the limited instances, because it's not a requirement for all of the games I've run, in the instances where I've required it, it has brought people out that are a little more reserved, and people who like me are a little more reckless. We can actually help tamper it in a little bit too. Because if everybody at the table is just reacting to literally everything that's going in, the chances are the whole table's going to be fucking dead. So having people who are a little bit more on the cautious side kind of helps dial in people who are a little bit more likely to be a wild card. And that's important. So as much as the emotional investment is important for me as a GM, right? I also want people to be able to essentially step out of a comfort zone. As a player who functions in first person, if I'm kind of corralled into a situation where normally I wouldn't be, I have to adjust to that. And it's out of my comfort zone to not kind of be able to react to a situation. So if it's like a little more constructed of a box I have to sit in, I'm not comfortable in that, but it gives me a bigger value as a player, right? And people like you, Evan, who necessarily don't want to like have to be too out of like what that comfort zone is. If you see a bunch of people out of their comfort zone, you might be more encouraged to say, "Oh, well, everybody else is kind of doing this thing. Maybe I want to dip my toes into the water of whatever this is," and it brings you out a little bit. And even if it doesn't, that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with kind of keeping yourself in a more reserved role, even in first person.
So, just randomly, 2-point play here. I did find chapter 1 of the introduction of the Call of Cthulhu book. It's hysterical. They're toggling. So, check this out. This is literally just example of what a role-playing game is. So, this is Paula. Let's sneak around the boss's house looking for clues. Joe, let's go. I'll drive us over in my automobile. Is there anyone on the street? Kathy, my private eye Jack can pick the lock on the back door. Paula, I'll keep watch from the street. Now, granted, a lot of Paula's is dialogue, but, just as you're going through, it's toggling between both third and first person as it's going with non-dialogue things, which is hysterical. Also, just because I'm here, I'm going to choose violence really fast, just because I can, because why not? I had this conversation a couple years ago on Symphony's Discord about third person, first person, just in, general chatter. And someone made the statement very pompously, "Oh, I always role play in first person because I'm actually embodying the character, unlike some people who are just coming here and running their character through circumstances." I was very proud of it. I remember looking at that comment, it's like, how about you go kick rocks and sit in a corner? Because I have cried in character doing third person. I have stayed up at night grieving over characters while role playing in third person. I have had my nervous system go through the roof, come off of a game with wet, sweaty hands because I was so stressed out about what was happening to my character, even though I was role playing in first person. So the violence that I'm choosing right now is, I think I'm going to reject the notion that first person is more intimately tied with a character more than it is just a stylistic presentation choice, which is opposing everything that has been said this entire conversation, which is why I said I'm choosing violence.
And that's totally fair. I did specifically state with that that's my interpretation of it. So it's hard for you to choose violence when it's, hey, this is how I interpret this thing, because
that's also fair.
Because I do totally see your point. I just know that me as a player, I'm not as emotionally invested if I'm playing in third person. So because of that, I like when I've had people specifically play in first person, it's because I'm connecting as much to their characters as I want them to connect to my story. And if I don't have what feels like that buy-in from the players, it's hard for me to stay enthusiastic as a person telling the story if I don't feel that they're receiving the same emotional impact that I might be.
Fair.
So I like that. So Bridget chose violence and Allie chose judo and redirected.
And I love it.
Yeah, and I think maybe this is true for other people, but I think I get my emotional vibes more from what's going on the table as a whole. I have not really ever loved a character that I've played enough that I've worried about, their well-being. Although, again, in fairness, mostly what I play is Cthulhu characters, so I have to go into it with this notion of like they're disposable. But I have definitely like been juiced up for hours when we had a really good session and everybody was in it and everybody was working together, and either everybody died or they didn't. It's definitely like finished a game at like 10 and still be up at 3 o'clock and be like, man, that was
Yeah.
because I was able to feel plugged into the group project.
Oh, beautiful
Um,
articulation there.
so yeah, so I'm just in a wishy-washy way, not disagreeing with either of you, but that's fine.
Because I don't think there is a one size fits all, conclusion to this. Like Ali has
Yeah.
said multiple times, it's your personal preference when you're getting into the driver's seat how you want to actually narrate your experience. I know we said 30 minutes and we are at 29. So I do want to ask just this last question that I have, and Ali touched on it earlier, and I thought it was just amazing. When you're looking at performative role plays, when we're talking about podcasting, streaming, live shows, things of that nature, do you guys agree or disagree that all the styles should match? Everyone should either be in third, everyone should either be in first, or is that combo jarring or difficult to connect with, or have you even noticed?
As an avid listener to many podcasts, I have found that I have never heard a table that specifically everybody matched. Most
Nice.
what I have generally found, right, is that most do the combination of first and third, right? Like they describe their generic actions in third person so that maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not, but like listeners kind of get a mental picture of what's going to happen, and then they do dialogue and all of that sort of thing in first person because that's the way that the character would respond to a situation, or it's the way a character would respond to another character.
Mm-hmm.
But and pretty specifically, pretty much everybody in the Masks campaign for the Old Ways podcast behaved like that. And even though it's not a purely first person driven game, there's still a lot of emotionally hard hitting things, which is what you said, Bridget. Like, I hang out primarily in third person and I'm still emotionally impacted. Yeah, trust me, as a listener, I've been very hard emotionally impacted by things that happened when characters were primarily in a third person narrative.
Good
So it's not
perspective.
that it's a less impactful way to play. I think it's all about how much you're willing to deep dive into a situation, right? So like you do a role play that's recorded, and I have first-hand experience in this with like when we did our 5-part series on the Symphony stream.
Mm-hmm.
There were two particular sessions where I came off and I was shook for several hours afterward, and it's like that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, and it had nothing to do with being on camera. It had everything to do with what was happening in game and what was happening with character interactions, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah.
Beautifully said, and thank you for that too.
Yeah. I could be wrong. But my feeling is that the closer the production gets to a radio play,
Mm-hmm.
the more it tends to have everyone unified in a first person. Um, I don't know that that's. I'm trying to think like the various spectrums, right? So we've got like Old Ways and Symphony and Ain't Slayed Nobody, and another one. What the hell, Pretending to Be People, and I think the more like super heavily edited, sound designed, the ones that sound less like they're players at a table and conceal the mechanics a little bit more tend to go more towards first person as like a general rule. I don't think they have to. I don't think it takes away necessarily, except like one particular production that touched on the Yellow King where it really blurred some lines.
Mm.
Um, but it's I think that's just because it gives that more theatrical feel to it, and it takes away one layer of separation from the drama.
Which is what
I would
Ali
agree with
echoed
that.
early, which is brilliant. Yep. Yep. Which would match my own experiences. Like the ones that were telling me, hey, you have to be in first person were the ones that were paying big money or had really high productions to be like, hey, we do first person here. It's like, oh, okay, got it. I'm just gonna move on with my day on that one. Beautiful. Okay, guys, that was literally all of my questions on the topic. We are over time by 4 minutes. Are there any closing thoughts you guys have on character immersion, first versus third person?
Play however you want.
Don't play second person unless you're the GM.
Regardless of what
Sorry.
Oh,
I
you're
hate Evan.
terrible. Um,
It really is terrible.
Regardless of whether you play in first, third, or a combination of both, it's not an excuse to be an asshole.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you can't be in first person and say and do all these things, and it's like, oh, well, that's just how my character is. No, you're using it as an excuse to be a dick. Or if you're doing like, oh yeah, he's going to do this and he's going to do this and he's going to do this, and they're all against a particular character because you don't like the player or you don't like the character, congratulations, you're still being an asshole. Neither is appropriate regardless of roleplay and regardless of style.
One more time for the people in the back, please.
Don't be an asshole.
Thank you. It's just really simple. We're here playing. It's a role-playing game. We're here to play. Don't be an asshole. Evan is second person.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, you just, it's awkward. People don't know if you're talking about you or them. Don't make me explain it.
I'm messing with you. You're good. You're good. You're good. Any closing thoughts on the topic here, Evan?
No, not really. I don't have a prescriptive preference here. I think it's going to work for people in different ways. If somebody was like, I've never done this before, I might suggest third while they're learning the mechanics. But if they're like, I really am in this because I want to inhabit somebody else, then I would suggest first person and see what happens. I don't have evidence that one leads to better or worse play, and that's great. I'm excited. Go play.
Go play.
Don't be a jerk.
I think. Go ahead, Alan.
I was gonna expand on Evan's thing there right now, where it's you also don't have to stick to one style. If you find that you're uncomfortable playing one way or another, it's totally okay to switch.
Even mid-stroke, mid-game,
and actually,
mid-sentence.
I'm gonna screw us up here at the time limit by saying
let's go.
that once in a while, right as we're getting into a real heated, like dramatic exchange, I have switched into first unconsciously and then drop back out of it. So there is, like, for me, some Zen state where I feel totally on the same wavelength and I'm willing to make that step.
Yeah.
I have never chosen it consciously. It just happens.
It just happens. I think I'll say in closing, echoing off of what Allie just said, play to your preference, play to your comfort level, even if that means you switch mid-stroke. From apparently what all three of us are hearing, it's not actually that jarring when you do it. Some people do it with a combo anyways. And I think the other thing I'll say in closing is if you've only ever tried one method, it might be worth it to just like trial out the other one just to see if you like it. The worst that can happen is you step over and you're like, yep, this isn't for me. And you go right back to where you were. So that's what we got there. Thank you so much, Allie, for actually originating this idea. I think this was a great discussion. We probably could have gone an hour. I don't even know why I said 30 minutes in the first place, but here we go. One last time as we are going to close out the auditorium. Allie, tell us who you are, what you do, and where people can find you.
Yes, I'm Allie Ravey. You can find me over on the Old Ways podcast, especially in the Discord server. I play Katerina Bogdanovich in the Vampire the Masquerade Chronicles. And if you would like to join our Patreon, you can find us at the Old Way podcast. No, sorry, God.
You're good.
Patreon.com/the Old Ways podcast. So come join us, won't you?
And Evan, baby, close us out, baby. Tell us who you are, what you do, and where people can find you.
Evan Perlman. I write and organize community projects, and you can find me on the Symphony Discord. You can find me on the Miskatonic Repository Creator Circle on Facebook, or you can sacrifice 3 chickens under a full moon on the 3rd Thursday of February. Whisper your deepest held secrets into a tree stump, and then I will appear.
But only if you do the ritual in second person. And then last but not least, all three of us, I'm never going to let you live that one down, Evan. Jesus, add that to the long list of reasons why I love you. All three of us will actually be at Chaosium Con coming up here April. So at the point of, I'll release this probably, guys, I don't know, next week. We'll pray about it. Sometime. It'll be released. Guys, check us out at Chaosium Con. There's going to be a lot of value, a lot of content. There are going to be panels that these two individuals are on, live shows, mimosa mixers, pickup games, all type of awesome things. So if you're looking to connect with either Allie or Evan in person or myself, we will all be at Chaosium Con. That is going to be April 13th through the 16th in Ann Arbor, Michigan. If you slide on over to Tabletop Events, you can see our landing page there for basically Chaosium Con 2023. This will be our second year. The first year was an absolute phenomenal blast. It'll be a good time to get in and just get plugged in with all of Chaosium's IP. It's a big celebration of everything Chaosium. So come on down, over, up, around, and get your Call of Cthulhu on, your 7th Rune Quest, Lords of the Middle. I mean, everything. Just come hang out with us. It's going to be a good time. Thank you guys so much for joining the Symphony again. Have a wonderful night. Mwah.